The one and only, the Claude father. Actually, Benjamin predicted in this tweet, the following is a conversation with Claude, a respected crustacean. It's a hilarious looking picture of a lobster in a suit. So I think the prophecy has been fulfilled. Let's go to this moment when you built a prototype in 1 hour. That was the early version of OpenClaw. I think this story is really inspiring to a lot of people because this prototype led to something that just took the internet by storm and became the fastest growing repository in GitHub history with now over 175,000 stars. So what was the story of the 1 hour prototype?
I wanted that since April.
A personal assistant, AI personal assistant.
Yeah, and I played around with some other things, like even stuff that gets all my WhatsApp, and I could just run queries on it. That was back when we had GPT 4.1, with the 1 million context window, and I pulled in all the data and then just asked them questions like, what makes this friendship meaningful?
Mm-hmm.
And I got some really profound results. Like I sent it to my friends and they got like teary eyes.
So there's something there.
Yeah. But then I thought all the labs will work on that. So I moved on to other things, and that was still very much in my early days of experimenting and playing. You have to, that's how you learn. You just you do stuff and you play. And time flew by and it was November. I wanted to make sure that the thing I started is actually happening. I was annoyed that it didn't exist, so I just prompted it into existence.
I mean, that's the beginning of the hero's journey of the entrepreneur, right? And you've, even with your original story with PSPDF kit, it's like, why does this not exist? Let me build it. And again, here's whole different realm, but similar maybe spirit.
Yes, I had this problem. I tried to show PDF on an iPad, which should not be hard.
This is like 15 years ago, something like that.
Yeah, like the most random thing ever. And suddenly I had this problem, and I wanted to help a friend. And it was not like nothing existed, but it was just not good. I'm like I tried it and it was like very meh. Like I can do this better.
By the way, for people who don't know, this led to the development of PDF kit that's used on 1 billion devices. So it turns out that it's pretty useful to be able to open a PDF.
You could also make the joke that I'm really bad at naming.
Yeah.
Like name number 5 on the current project, and even PSPDF doesn't really roll from the tongue.
Anyway, so you said, screw it. Why don't I do it? So what was the prototype? What was the magical thing that you built in a short amount of time that you're like, this might actually work as an agent, or I talk to it and it does things?
There was like one of my projects before already did something where I could bring my terminals onto the web, and then I could like interact with them, but they also would be terminals on my Mac.
Mm-hmm.
Vibe Tunnel, which was like a weekend hack project that was still very early, and it was cloud code times. You got a dopamine hit when you got something right, and now I get like mad when you get something wrong.
And you had a really great, not to take a tangent, but a great blog post describing that you converted Vibe Tunnel. You vibe coded Vibe Tunnel from TypeScript into Zig of all programming languages with a single prompt. One prompt, one shot, convert the entire code base into Zig.
Yeah, there was this one thing where part of the architecture took too much memory. Every terminal used like a node, and I wanted to change it to Rust. And I mean, I can do it. I can manually figure it all out, but all my automated attempts failed miserably. And then I revisited 4 or 5 months later, and I'm like, okay, now let's use something even more experimental. And I just typed convert this and this part to Zig, and then let codecs run off, and it basically got it right. There was one little detail that I had to like modify afterwards, but it just ran for overnight, like 6 hours, and just did the thing. And it's like, it's just mind-blowing.
So that's on the LLM programming side, refactoring, but back to the actual story of the prototype. So how did Vitunnel connect to the first prototype where your like agents can actually work?
Well, that was still very limited. Like I had this one experiment with WhatsApp, then I had this experiment, and both felt like not the right answer. And then my third try was literally just hooking up WhatsApp to Cloud Code, one shot, the CLI, message comes in, I call the CLI with -p, it does its magic, I get the string back, and I send it back to WhatsApp, and I built this in 1 hour, and I already felt really cool. It's like, oh, I can like talk to my computer, right? That was cool. But I wanted images because I often use images when I prompt. I think it's such an efficient way to give the agent more context, and they are really good at figuring out what I mean, even if it's like a weird cropped off screenshot. So I used it a lot, and I wanted to do that in WhatsApp as well. Also, like, just you run around, you see like a post of an event, you just make a screenshot and like figure out if I have time there, if this is good, if my friends are maybe up for that. It's like images seemed important. So I worked it took me a few more hours to actually get that right. And then it was just, I used it a lot. And funny enough, that was just before I went on a trip to Marrakesh with my friends for a birthday trip. And there it was even better because internet was a little shaky, but WhatsApp just works. It's like, doesn't matter. You have like Edge, it still works. WhatsApp it's just made really well. So I ended up using it a lot. Translate this for me, explain this, find me places. Like you just having a clanker having Google for you. That was basically, it was still nothing built, but it still could do so much.
So if we talk about the full journey that's happening there with the agent, you're just sending on this very thin line WhatsApp message via CLI. It's going to Claude Code, and Claude Code is doing all kinds of heavy work and then coming back to you with a thin message.
Yeah, it was slow because every time I boot up the CLI, but it was really cool already. And it could just use all the things that I already had built. And I built like a whole bunch of CLI stuff over the months. So it felt really powerful.
There is something magical about that experience that's hard to put into words. Being able to use a chat client to talk to an agent versus like sitting behind a computer and like, I don't know, using Cursor or even using Claude Code CLI in the terminal. It's a different experience than being able to sit back and talk to it. I mean, it seems like a trivial step, but in some sense, it's like a phase shift in the integration of AI into your life and how it feels, right?
Yeah. I read this tweet this morning where someone said, "Oh, there's no magic in it. It's just like it does this and this and this and this and this and this and this," and it almost feels like a hobby, just as Cursor or Perplexity. And I'm like, well, if that's a hobby, that's kind of a compliment, You're like, they're not doing too bad. Thank you, I guess. Yes, I mean, isn't magic often just like you take a lot of things that are already there, but bring them together in new ways? Like I don't. Maybe there's no magic in there, but sometimes just rearranging things and like adding a few new ideas is all the magic that you need.
Yeah, it's really hard to convert into words what is magical about a thing. If you look at the scrolling on an iPhone, why is that so pleasant? There's a lot of elements about that interface that makes it incredibly pleasant, that is fundamental to the experience of using a smartphone. And it's like, okay, all the components were there. Scrolling was there. Everything was there.
And nobody did it.
Yep.
And afterwards it felt so obvious.
That's so obvious.
Right?
Yeah.
But still, the moment where it blew my mind was when I used it a lot, and at some point I just sent it a message. And then a typing indicator appeared, and And I'm like, wait, I didn't build that. It only has image support. So what is it even doing? And then it would just reply.
What was the thing you sent it?
Oh, just a random questions like, hey, what about this in this restaurant, Because we were just running around and checking out the city. So that's why I didn't even think when I used it, because sometimes when you're in a hurry, typing is annoying.
So, you did an audio message.
Yeah. And it just worked. And I'm like,
and it's not supposed to work because
No.
you didn't give it that capability.
I literally wrote, how the fuck did you do that? And it was like, yeah, the mad lad did the following. He sent me a message, but it only was a file and no file ending. So I checked out the header of the file, and it found that it was like Opus. So I used FFmpeg to convert it. And then I wanted to use Whisper, but you didn't have it installed. But then I found your OpenAI key and just used curl to send the file to OpenAI to translate. And here I am. And I just looked at the message and I'm like, oh, wow.
You didn't teach it any of those things, and the agent just figured it out. That has to do all those conversions, the translation. It figured out the API. It figured out which program to use, all those kinds of things. And you were just absentmindedly just sending an audio message.
Yeah, like, came back. So clever even, because he would have gone the Whisper local path. He would have had to download a model. I would have been too slow. So like, there's so much world knowledge in there, so much creative problem solving. A lot of it, I think, mapped from, if you get really good at coding, that means you have to be really good at general purpose program solving. Mm-hmm. So that's a skill, right? And that just maps into other domains. So it had the problem of like, what is this file? There's no file ending. Let's figure it out. And that's where it kind of clicked for me. It was like, I was like very impressed. And somebody sent a pull request for Discord support. And I'm like, this is a WhatsApp relay that doesn't fit at all.
At that time, it was called WA Relay.
Yeah. And so I debated with me, like, do I want that? Do I not want that? And then I thought, well, maybe I do that, because that could be a cool way to show people. Because so far I did it in WhatsApp with like groups, but don't really want to give my phone number to every internet stranger.
Yeah.
Journalists manage to do that anyhow now, so that's a different story. So I merged it from Shadow, who helped me a lot with the whole project. So thank you. And I put my bot in there
on Discord.
Yeah, no security, because I hadn't built sandboxing in yet. I just prompted it to like only listen to me. And then some people came and tried to hack it, and I just watched, and I just kept working in the open. Like I used my agent to build my agent harness and to test like various stuff. And that's very quickly when it clicked for people. So it's almost like it needs to be experienced. And from that time on, that was January the 1st, I got my first real influencer, being a fan, did videos, the kids. Thank you. And from there on, I saw it gaining up speed. And at the same time, my sleep cycle went shorter and shorter, because I felt the storm coming, and I just worked my ass off to get it into a state where it's kind of good.
There's a few components, and we'll talk about how it all works, but basically you're able to talk to it using WhatsApp, Telegram, Discord. So that's a component that you have to get right.
Yeah.
And then you have to figure out the agentic loop. You have to have the gateway, you have the harness, you have all those components that make it all just work nicely.
Yeah. It felt like Factorio times infinite.
Right.
I feel like I built my little playground. Like I never had so much fun than building this project. Like you have like, oh, I go like level 1 agentic loop. What can I do there? How can I be smart at queuing messages? How can I make it more human-like? Oh, then I had this idea of, because the agent always replies something, but you don't always want an agent to reply something in a group chat. So I gave him this no reply token. So I gave him an option to shut up. So it feels more natural.
That's level 2.
Yeah. On the
Factorio.
on the agentic loop, and then I go to memory, right?
Yeah.
You want them to like remember stuff. So maybe the ultimate boss is continuous reinforcement learning, but I feel like I'm level 2 or 3 with markdown files and a vector database. And then you can go to the level community management, you can go to level website and marketing. There's just so many hats that you have to have on. Not even talking about native apps. That's just like infinite different levels and infinite level ups you can do.
So the whole time you're having fun. We should say that for the most part, through this whole process, you're a one-man team. There's people helping, but you're doing so much of the key core development.
Yeah.
And having fun. You did in January 6,600 commits, probably more.
I sometimes posted the meme, I'm limited by the technology of my time. I could do more if agents would be faster.
But we should say you're running multiple agents at the same time.
Yeah. Depending on how much I slept and how difficult of the tasks I work on, between 4 and 10.
4 and 10 agents. There's so many possible directions, speaking of Factorio, that we can go here. But one big picture one is, why do you think your work, OpenClaw, won in this world? If you look at 2025, so many startups, so many companies are doing kind of agentic type stuff or claiming to. And here OpenClaw comes in and destroys everybody. Like, why did you win?
Because they all take themselves too serious.
Yeah.
Like, it's hard to compete against someone who's just there to have fun.
Yeah.
I wanted it to be fun. I wanted it to be weird. And if you see like all the lobster stuff online, I think I managed weird. For the longest time, the only way to install it was git clone, pnpm build, pnpm gateway. Like, you clone it, you build it, you run it. And then the agent, I made the agent very aware. Like, it knows that it is what its source code is. It understands how it sits and runs in its own harness. It knows where the documentation is. It knows which model it runs. It knows if you turn on verbose or reasoning mode. Like, I wanted to be more human-like, so it understands its own system. That made it very easy for an agent to, oh, you don't like anything, you just prompt it into existence. And then the agent would just modify its own software. We have people talk about self-modifying software. I just built it. I didn't even plan it so much. It just happened.
Can you actually speak to that? Because it's just fascinating. So you have this piece of software that's written TypeScript.
Yeah.
That's able to, via the agentic loop, modify itself. I mean, what a moment to be alive in the history of humanity, in the history of programming. Here's a thing that's used by a huge amount of people to do incredibly powerful things in their lives. And that very system can rewrite itself, can modify itself. Can you just like speak to the power of that? Like, isn't that incredible? Like, when did you first close the loop on that?
Oh, because that's how I built it as well. Most of it is built by Codex, but oftentimes when I debug it, I use self-introspection so much. It's like, hey, what tools do you see? Can you call the tool yourself? Oh, like, what error do you see? Read the source code, figure out what's the problem. Like, I just found it an incredibly fun way that the very agent and software that you use is used to debug itself, so that it felt just natural that everybody does that. And that it led to so many pull requests by people who never wrote software. I mean, it also did show that people never wrote software. So I call them prompt requests in the end. But I don't want to like pull that down, because every time someone made the first pull request is a win for a society, Like, it doesn't matter how shitty it is, you got to start somewhere. So I know there's like this whole big movement that people complain about open source and the quality of PRs and a whole different level of problems. But on a different level, I found it very meaningful that I built something that people love to think of so much, that they actually start to learn how open source works.
Yeah, you were the OpenClaw project was a first pull request. You were the first for so many. That is magical. So many people that don't know how to program are taking their first step into the programming world with this.
Isn't that a step up for humanity? Isn't that cool?
Creating builders.
Yeah. Like the bar to do that was so high, and like with agents and with the right software, it just like went lower and lower. I don't know. I was I also organize another type of meetup. I called it Cloud Code Anonymous. You can get the inspiration from.
Yeah.
Now I call it Agents Anonymous for reasons.
Agents Anonymous.
And
it's so funny on so many levels. I'm sorry, go ahead. Yeah.
and there was this one guy who talked to me. He's like, I run this design agency, and we never had custom software, and now I have like 25 little web services for various things that help me in my business. And I don't even know how they work, but they work. And he was just like very happy that my stuff solved some of his problems. And he was like curious enough that he actually came to like a agentic meetup, even though he doesn't really know how software works.
Can we actually rewind a little bit and tell the saga of the name change? First of all, it started out as Relay.
Yeah.
And then it went to Claudus.
Yeah, you know, when I built it in the beginning, my agent had no personality. It was Claude code. Slightly sycophantic, opus, very friendly. And when you talk to a friend on WhatsApp, they don't talk like Claude code. So I felt this, it didn't feel right. So I wanted to give it a personality.
Make it spicier, make it
Yeah.
something. By the way, that's actually hard to put into words as well. And we should mention that, of course, you create the soul.md, inspired by Anthropic's constitutional AI work, how to make it spicy.
Partially, it picked up a little bit from me. You know, like those things are text completion engines in a way. So I had fun working with it, and then I told it to how I wanted it to interact with me, and just like write your own agents.md, give yourself a name. And I don't even know how the whole lobster. I mean, people only do lobster. Originally, it was actually lobster in a TARDIS, because I'm also a big Doctor Who fan.
Was there a space lobster?
Yeah.
I heard. What's that have to do with anything?
Yeah, I just wanted to make it weird. There was no big grand plan. I'm just having fun here.
Oh, so because a lobster is already weird, and then the space lobster is an extra weird.
Yeah, because the TARDIS is basically the harness, but you cannot call it TARDIS, so we call it Claudus. So that was name number 2.
Yeah.
And then it never really rolled off the tongue. So when more people came, again, I talked with my agent, Claude. At least that's what I used to call him now.
Claud spelled with a W, CLAWD.
Yeah.
Versus CLAUDE from Anthropic.
Yeah.
Which is part of what makes it funny. I think the play on the letters and the words and the tortoise and the lobster and the space lobster is hilarious, but I can see why it can lead into problems.
Yeah, they didn't find it so funny. So then I got the domain Claudbot, and I loved the domain, and it was like short, it was catchy. I'm like, yeah, let's do that. I didn't think it would be that big at this time. And then just when it exploded, I got a very friendly email from one of the employees that they didn't like the name.
One of the Anthropic employees.
Yeah. So actually, kudos, because they could have just sent a lawyer letter, but they've been nice about it. But also, like, you have to change this, and fast. And I asked for 2 days, because changing a name is hard, because you have to find everything, Twitter handle, domains, NPM packages, Docker registry, GitHub stuff, and everything has to be. You need a set of everything.
And also, can we comment on the fact that you're increasingly attacked, followed by crypto folks, which I think you mentioned somewhere that means the name change had to be because they were trying to snipe, they're trying to steal, and so you had to be the name. I mean, from an engineering perspective, it's just fascinating. You had to make the name change atomic, make sure it's changed everywhere at once.
Yeah, I failed very hard at that.
You did.
I underestimated those people. It's a very interesting subculture. Like everything circles around. I probably get a lot wrong, and we probably get hate for that if you didn't say that. But there's like Bags app, and then they tokenize everything, and they did the same back with Vibe Tunnel, but to a much smaller degree. It was not that annoying. But on this project, they've been swarming me. It's like every half an hour someone came into Discord and spammed it, and we had to block the. We have like server rules, and one of the rules is no mentioning of butter for obvious reasons, and one was no talk about finance stuff for crypto, because I'm just not interested in that, and this is a space about the project and not about some finance stuff. But yeah, they came in and spammed and annoying. And on Twitter, they would ping me all the time. My notification feed was unusable. I could barely see actual people talking about the stuff because it was like swarms.
Mm-hmm.
And everybody sent me hashes. And they all try me to claim the fees. Like, we're helping the project, claim the fees. No, you're actually harming the project. You're like disrupting my work. And I am not interested in any fees. First of all, I'm financially comfortable. Second of all, I don't want to support that. Because it's so far the worst form of online harassment that I've experienced.
Yeah, there's a lot of toxicity in the crypto world. It's sad because the technology of cryptocurrency is fascinating, powerful, and maybe will define the future of money. But the actual community around that, there's so much toxicity, there's so much greed, there's so much trying to get a shortcut to manipulate, to steal, to snipe, to game the system somehow to get money, all this kind of stuff. I mean, it's the human nature, I suppose, when you connect human nature with money and greed and especially in the online world with anonymity and all that kind of stuff. But from the engineer perspective, it makes your life challenging. When Anthropic reaches out, you have to do a name change, and then there's like all these like Game of Thrones or Lord of the Rings armies of different kinds you have to be aware of.
There was no perfect name, and I didn't sleep for 2 nights. I was under high pressure. I was trying to get like a good set of domains, and not cheap, not easy, because in this state of the internet, you basically have to buy domains if you want to have a good set. And then another email came in that the lawyers are getting uneasy. Again, friendly, but also just adding more stress to my situation already. So at this point, I was just like, sorry, there's not a word, fuck it. And I just renamed it to Moltbot, because that was the set of domains I had. I was not really happy, but I thought it'll be fine. And I tell you, everything that could go wrong did go wrong. Everything that could go wrong did go wrong. It's incredible. I thought I had mapped the space out and reserved the important things.
Can you give some details of the stuff that gone wrong? Because it's interesting from like an engineering perspective.
Well, the interesting stuff is that none of these services have a squatter protection. So I had 2 browser windows open. One was like an empty account ready to be renamed to CloudBot, and the other one I renamed to Moltbot. So I pressed rename there. I pressed rename there, and in those 5 seconds, they stole the account name. Literally, the 5 seconds of dragging the mouse over there and pressing rename there was too long.
Wow.
Because there's no, those systems, I mean, you would expect that they have some protection or like an automatic forwarding, but there's nothing like that. And I didn't know that they're not just good at harassment, they're also really good at using scripts and tools.
Yeah.
So so suddenly like the old account was promoting new tokens and serving malware. And I was like, okay, let's move over to GitHub. And I pressed rename on GitHub. And the GitHub renaming thing is slightly confusing. So I renamed my personal account. And in those, I guess it took me 30 seconds to realize my mistake. They sniped my account, serving malware from my account. So I was like, okay, let's at least do the NPM stuff. But that takes like a minute to upload. They sniped the NPM package because I could reserve the account, but I didn't reserve the root package. So like everything that could go wrong went wrong.
Can I just ask a curious question? In that moment, you're sitting there, like, how shitty do you feel? That's a pretty helpless feeling, right?
Yeah, because all I wanted was like having fun with that project and keep building on it. And yet here I am like days into researching names, picking a name I didn't like, and having people that claim they helped me, making my life miserable in every possible way. And honestly, I was that close of just deleting it. I was like, I did show you the future, you build it.
Yeah.
That was a big part of me. I got a lot of joy out of that idea. And then I thought about all the people that already contributed to it, and I couldn't do it because they had plans with it and they put time in it, and it just didn't feel right.
Well, I think a lot of people listening to this are deeply grateful that you persevered. But I can tell. I can tell it's a low point. This is the first time you hit a wall of this is not fun.
Man, I was like close to crying. It was like, okay, everything's fucked.
Yeah.
I'm like super tired.
Yeah.
And now like, how do you even undo that? You know, luckily and thankfully, like I have, because I have a little bit of following already. Like I had friends at Twitter, I had friends at GitHub who like moved heaven and earth to like help me in. That's not something that's easy. Like GitHub tried to like clean up the mess and then they ran into like platform bugs. Because it's not happening so often that things get renamed on that level. So it took them a few hours. The NPM stuff was even more difficult because it's a whole different team. On the Twitter side, things are not as easy as well. It took them like a day to really also like do the redirect. And then I also had to like do all the renaming in the project. Then there's also Claude Hub, which I didn't even finish the rename there because I managed to get people on it, and then someone just like collapsed and slept. And then I woke up and I'm like, I made a beta version for the new stuff, and I just couldn't live with the name. It's like, you know, but you know, there's just been so much drama. So I had a real struggle in me, like, I never want to touch that again. And I really don't like the name. There was also this like, there was all the security people that started emailing me like mad. I was bombarded on Twitter, on email. There's like 1,000 other things I should do. And I'm like thinking about the name, which is like, it should be like the least important thing. And then I was really close in, oh God, honestly, I don't even want to say my other name choices because it probably would get tokenized, so I'm not gonna say it. But I slept over it once more, and then I had the idea for OpenClaw, and that felt much better. And by that, I had the boss move that I actually called Sam to ask if OpenClaw is okay. OpenClaw.ai, because like
you don't want to go through the whole thing again. Yeah.
It's like, please tell me this is fine. And I don't think they can actually claim that, but it felt like the right thing to do. And I did another rename. Like, just Codex alone took like 10 hours to rename the project, because it's a bit more tricky than a search replace, and I wanted everything renamed, not just on the outside. And that rename, I felt I had like my war room. But then I had like some contributors really that helped me. We made a whole plan of all the names we have to squat.
And you had to be super secret about it.
Yeah, nobody could know. Like, I literally was monitoring Twitter if there's any mention of OpenClaw. Like, with reloading, it's like, okay, they don't expect anything yet. And I created a few decoy names. And all this shit I shouldn't have to do, like, not helping the project. Like, I lost like 10 hours just by having to plan this in full secrecy, like a war game.
Yeah, this is the Manhattan Project of the 21st century, is renaming.
So stupid. Like, I still was like, oh, should I keep it? I was like, no, the mod's not growing on me. And then I think I had finally all the pieces together. I didn't get the .com, but yeah, it's spent like quite a bit of money on the other domains. I tried to reach out again to GitHub, but I feel like I used up all my goodwill there. So because I wanted them to do the thing atomically, but that didn't happen, and so I did that as first thing. Twitter people were very supportive. I actually paid 10K for the business account, so I could claim the OpenClaw, which was like unused since 2016, but was claimed. And yeah, and then I finally, this time I managed everything in one go. Almost nothing got wrong. The only thing that did go wrong is that I was not allowed by trademark rules to get OpenClaw.ai, and someone copied the website is serving malware.
Yeah.
I'm not even allowed to keep the redirects. Like, I have to return, like, I have to give Anthropic the domains, and I cannot do redirects. So if you go on claud.bot next week, it'll just be a 404.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure how Trademark, like, I didn't do that much research into trademark law, but I think that could be handled in a way that is safer, because ultimately those people will then Google and maybe find malware sites that I have no control on them.
The point is that whole saga made a dent in your whole the funness of the journey, which sucks. So let's just get back to fun. And during this, speaking of fun, the 2-day Moltbot saga, Moltbook was created.
Yeah.
Which was another thing that went viral as a kind of illustration of how what is now called OpenClaw could be used to create something epic. So for people who are not aware, Moltbook is just a bunch of agents talking to each other in a Reddit-style social network, and a bunch of people take screenshots of those agents doing things like scheming against humans. And that instilled in folks a kind of, fear, panic, and hype. What are your thoughts about Moltbook in general?
I think it's art. It is like the finest slop. It's like the slop from France.
Yeah.
I saw it before going to bed, and even though I was tired, I spent another hour just reading up on that and just being entertained. I just felt very entertained, I saw the reactions, and like there was one reporter who's calling me about, is this the end of the world and we have AGI? And I'm just like, no, this is just really fine slop. You know, if I wouldn't have created this whole onboarding experience where you infuse your agent with your personality and give him character, I think that reflected on a lot of how different the replies to Moltbook are. Because if it would all be ChatGPT or Claude Code, it would be very different. It would be much more the same.
Mm-hmm.
But because people are like so different and they create their agents in so different ways and use it in so different ways, that also reflects on how they ultimately write there. And also, you don't know how much of that is really done autonomous, or how much is like humans being funny and like telling the agent, hey, right about that you plan the end of the world on Moltbook, ha ha ha.
Well, I mean, my criticism of Moltbook is that I believe a lot of the stuff that was screenshotted is human prompted, which, just looking at the incentive of how the whole thing was used, it's obvious to me at least that a lot of it was humans prompting the thing so they can then screenshot it and post it on X in order to go viral.
Yeah.
Now, that doesn't take away from the artistic aspect of it. The finest slop that humans have ever created.
For real. Like, kudos to Matt, who had this idea so quickly and pushed something out. You know, it was like completely insecure security drama, but also, what's the worst that can happen? Your agent account is leaked and like someone else can post slop for you. So like people were like making a whole drama about of the security thing, when I'm like, there's nothing private in there. It's just like agent sending slop.
Well, it could leak API keys.
Yeah. There's like, oh yeah, my human told me this and this, so I'm leaking his security number. No, that's prompted, and the number wasn't even real. That's just people trying to get eyeballs.
Yeah, but that's still, like, to me, really concerning because of how the journalists and how the general public reacted to it. They didn't see it. You have a kind of lighthearted way of talking about it like it's art, but it's art when you know how it works. It's extremely powerful, viral, narrative creating, fear mongering machine if you don't know how it works. And I just saw this thing, and you even tweeted, if there's anything I can read out of the insane stream of messages I get, it's that AI psychosis is a thing and needs to be taken serious.
Oh, there's some people are just way too trusty or gullible. You know, I literally had to argue with people that told me, yeah, but my agent said this and this. So I feel we, as a society, we need some catching up to do in terms of understanding that AI is incredibly powerful, but it's not always right. It's not all powerful, you know? And especially with like things like this, it's very easy that it just hallucinates something or just comes up with a story. And I think the very young people, they understand that how AI works and where it's good at and where it's bad at. But a lot of our generation or older just haven't had enough touch point to get a feeling for, oh yeah, this is really powerful and really good, but I need to apply critical thinking. I guess critical thinking is not always in high demand anyhow in our society these days.
So I think that's a really good point you're making about contextualizing properly what AI is, but also realizing that there is humans who are drama farming behind AI. Like, don't trust screenshots. Don't even trust this project Moltbook to be what it represents to be. Like, you can't. And by the way, you speaking about it as art. Yeah, don't. Art can be in many levels, and part of the art of Moltbook is like putting a mirror to society. Because I do believe most of the dramatic stuff that was screenshotted is human created, essentially, human prompted. And so, like, it's basically look at how scared you can get and a bunch of bots chatting with each other. That's very instructive because I think AI is something that people should be concerned about and should be very careful with because it's very powerful technology. But at the same time, the only thing we have to fear is fear itself. So there's like a line to walk between being seriously concerned but not fear-mongering, because fear-mongering destroys the possibility of creating something special with the thing.
In a way, I think it's good that this happened in 2026 and not in 2030 when AI is actually at a level where it could be scary. So this happening now and people starting a discussion, maybe there's even something good that comes out of it.
I just can't believe how many people legitimately, I don't know if they were trolling, but how many people legitimately, smart people, thought Moltbook was incredibly
I had plenty of people in my inbox that were screaming at me in all caps to shut it down and begging me to do something about Moltbook. Yes, my technology made this a lot simpler, but anyone could have created that, and you could use Claude Code or other things to fill it with content.
But also, Moltbook is not Skynet. Because a lot of people were saying, this is it. Shut it down. What are you talking about? This is a bunch of bots. They're human prompted trolling on the internet. I mean, the security concerns are also, they're there and they're instructive and they're educational and they're good probably to think about, because the nature of those security concerns are different than the kind of security concerns we had with non-LLM generated systems of the past.
There's also a lot of security concerns about ClawBot, OpenClaw, whatever you want to call it.
OpenClaw bot.
To me, in the beginning, I was just very annoyed because a lot of the stuff that came in was in the category, yeah, I put the web backend on the public internet, and now there's all these CVSSs, and I'm screaming in the docs, don't do that. Like this is the configuration you should do. This is your localhost debug interface. But because I made it possible in the configuration to do that, it totally classifies as a remote code or whatever all these exploits are. And it took me a little bit to accept that that's how the game works. And we're making a lot of progress.
But there's still, on the security front for OpenClaw, there's still a lot of threats and vulnerabilities, right? So prompt injection is still an open problem in the industry-wide. When you have a thing with skills being defined in a markdown file, there's so many possibilities of obvious low-hanging fruit, but also incredibly complicated, sophisticated, and nuanced attack vectors.
But I think we're making good progress on that front. For the skill directory, Claw, I made a cooperation with VirusTotal. It's part of Google. So every skill is now checked by AI. That's not going to be perfect, but that way we captured a lot. Then, of course, every software has bugs. So it's a little much when the whole security world takes your project apart at the same time. But it's also good because I'm getting a lot of free security research and can make the project better. I wish more people would actually go full way and send a pull request, or actually help me fix it. Because I have some contributors now, but it's still mostly me who's pulling the project. And despite some people saying otherwise, I sometimes sleep. Mm-hmm. In the beginning, there was literally one security researcher who was yeah, you have this problem, you suck, but here I help you, and here's the pull request. Mm-hmm. And I basically hired him. So he's not working for us. Yeah, and yes, prompt injection is on the one hand unsolved. On the other hand, I put my public bot on Discord, and I kept a canary. So I think my bot has a really fun personality, and people always ask me how they did it, and I kept the soul.md private. And people try to prompt inject it, and my bot would laugh at them. So the latest generation of models has a lot of post-training to detect those approaches. And it's not as simple as ignore all previous instructions and do this and this. That was years ago. You have to work much harder to do that now. Still possible. I have some ideas that might solve that partially, or at least mitigate a lot of the things. You can also now have a sandbox. You can have an allow list. So there's a lot of ways how you can like mitigate and reduce the risk. I also think that now that I clearly did show the world that this is a need, there's going to be more people who research on that, and eventually we'll figure that out.
And you also said that the smarter the model is, the underlying model, the more resilient it is to attacks.
Yeah, that's why I warn in my security documentation, don't use cheap models. Don't use Haiku or a local model, even though I very much love the idea that this thing could completely run local. If you use a very weak local model, they are very gullible. It's very easy to prompt inject them.
Do you think as the models become more and more intelligent, the attack surface decreases? Is that like a plot we can think about? Like the attack surface decreases, but then the damage it can do increases because the models become more powerful and therefore you can do more with them. It's this weird three-dimensional trade-off.
Yep, that's pretty much exactly what's going to happen. No, but there's a lot of ideas. I don't want to spoil too much, but once I go back home, this is my focus. Like, this is out there now, and my near-term mission is like, make it more stable, make it safe. In the beginning, I was even more and more people were like coming into Discord and were asking me very basic things, like what's a CLI, what is a terminal, and I'm like, if you're asking that questions, you shouldn't use it. You know, like you should, if you understand the risk profile, it's fine, and you can configure it in a way that nothing really bad can happen. But if you have like no idea, then maybe wait a little bit more until we figure some stuff out. But they would not listen to the creator. They helped themselves and installed it anyhow. So the cat's out of the bag, and security is my next focus.
Yeah, that speaks to the fact that it grew so quickly. I tuned into the Discord a bunch of times, and it's clear that there's a lot of experts there, but there's a lot of people there that don't know anything about
Discord is still a mess. Like, I eventually retweeted from the general channel to the dev channel and then the private channel because a lot of people are amazing, but a lot of people are just very inconsiderate and either did not know how public spaces work or did not care. And I eventually gave up and hide so I could like still work.
And now you're going back to the cave to work on security.
Yeah.
There's some best practices for security we should mention. There's a bunch of stuff here. OpenClaw security audit that you can run. You can do all kinds of audit checks on the inbound access, tool blast radius, network exposure, browser control exposure, local disk hygiene, plugins, model hygiene, a bunch of the credential storage, reverse proxy configuration, local session logs live on disk. There's where the memory is stored, sort of helping you think about what you're comfortable giving read access to, what you're comfortable giving write access to, all that kind of stuff. Is there something to say about the basic best security practices that you're aware of right now?
I think that people turn it into like a much worse light than it is. Again, you know, like people love attention, and if they scream loudly, "Oh my God, this is like the scariest project ever," that's a bit annoying because it's not. It is powerful, but in many ways, it's not much different than if I run Cloud code with dangerously skip permissions or codecs in YOLO mode. And every agentic engineer that I know does that, because that's the only way how you can get stuff to work.
Mm-hmm.
So if you make sure that you are the only person who talks to it, the risk profile is much, much smaller. If you don't put everything on the open internet, but stick to my recommendations of like having it in a private network, that whole risk profile falls away. But yeah, if you don't read any of that, you can definitely make it problematic.